Hello, my name is Kiriath, and today I've got something a little bit different and really quite special because Byron from Artis Opus came here and recorded a bunch of stuff to demo the Series D brushes and how to use them. You've heard me talk about them often enough, and you know that I use them a lot. If you take a look at the community tab of the channel, or if you look on Twitter, I'm currently repainting Imperial Knights using those brushes and the techniques that come with them, and I'm very much a novice, I'm very much a beginner. I'm enjoying it, but I'm not an expert. Byron very much is. These are his babies, he developed these brushes, and as such, he knows exactly what he's doing with them. So it was really, really cool to actually sit down and see them being used by someone who absolutely knows what they're doing. So today, we're just going to do a simple black and white gradient on some scenery, but in the video after this, we're going to tackle something very, very bright, very high contrast, and I'm going to give it a go as well, which actually works out better than you might think. So yeah, enjoy the video. Byron, of course, knows exactly what he's talking about, and I'm just really happy that he actually was able to come and spend some time to go over this stuff in person, and it just makes me want to paint more, to be totally honest. So yeah, I will see you after this. Okay, so Byron, do you want to take us through, well, everything really? We've got a bunch of models to look at, a bunch of different things you can do with this technique and these brushes. So
absolutely. So I've brought a big selection down today of everything. One of the things that I really like to push when I'm talking about this is you learn a technique and you can just apply it to everything. And people often they see the first way that a technique is used. Let's say we're going to talk about dry brushing today. Dry brushing is for basing, or dry brushing is for organic surfaces or inorganic or whatever, but it can be used for absolutely everything. So I've tried to bring down the widest possible variety of applications of the technique and of the different places it can be used. So for example, we have here super smooth kind of airbrush-like blending. Then we've got stippling, which is a bit more of a patina texture there. I'll pop this closer to the camera. We can see we've got some really nice nuance and variation in that. Just typical basing to a very high standard, but again, that's dry brushing. Smaller models, in case people think it's just bigger models, and even smaller models with OSL sourcing on them. And then we've got some big, chunky, smooth blending on wings here, like super, super soft. And then we have a slightly more in-your-face, contrasty version. I guess you could say it's rougher, but I'd prefer to say it's less subtle. Like that's what was intended there. It's not a rough use of the technique. We wanted something that jumped out.
Yeah, so it's just a lot more texture, isn't it?
Yeah, so we've got basically everything that I could think of there, and we're going to work our way through how I would demo dry brushing to someone, just whether they're a beginner or a pro or whatever. It's always in the same way, and talk about the basics of the technique, and then with those basics, hopefully the idea is that your viewers can go over an idea of how to take this one sequence of steps and mix it up themselves, customize it in their own way, and apply it to whatever they like, basically.
Yep. They've, at this point, I think pretty much everyone who watches the channel has, it's probably fair to say, heard me rave about this, because I think I've pretty much just only been using the Series D stuff since I got it.
Yeah.
I've very rarely touched any other type of brush.
I can see that, because your brushes have got shorter.
Yes.
They have, and this is what they do. It's one of the things we talk about. If you do stipple with them a lot, rather than wearing out and going all funny, they will just get shorter and shorter and shorter until the day they die.
Yeah. I think I've been using them pretty much every single day since I got them, essentially.
Makes
so
sense.
Anything that I've wanted to paint, I've kind of gone, okay, what can I do with those on this? Because it's enough fun that I don't actually want to paint any other way at the moment. So
that's the idea. What I'm hoping to go away from this is difficult for me to see it exactly where it is on camera, but areas like this, we can do some really nice little nuanced techniques, which I think would be a nice thing for you to be able to add to your arsenal, and just kind of broadening the spectrum of how you can apply a technique, and then maybe even involving it with some others, like a bit of quick glazing or something like that, so you can blast through 90% of it doing this and then tweak that last 10% using some other stuff.
Yeah, that sounds really, really good. So one of the things that I wanted us to take a look at is there's like a was like a showpiece, I want to say, in the form of doing like super ghostly like really high saturated colours on scenery.
Yeah.
Like that.
This is you used an airbrush one, which we get told about.
Yes.
Generally. We didn't use an airbrush.
And actually, you can just show the standard dry brush in there.
This is the black and white version. I think this looks. Wait, no, I think I can pull the terrain apart. It's going to focus better. There we go. I think this looks fantastic. Basically, what you've got here is a undercoat that goes from dark to light. Like the top of this is lighter than the dark of it. At base level, that's in terms of stippling. You could airbrush that, it doesn't matter particularly which way, but this one wasn't airbrushed, it was stippled. And then you have the dry brushing, and that's been done directionally. So, for example, if you look at these tiny little baby comets, it's only the top sections that have been hit, because with our brush, don't mind if I do, we have been stroking from the top down with some fairly careful applications. And what you get then is this lovely effect where the background underneath the bits that have been dry brushed, so the bits that have been stippled, you have a colour variation from dark to light, or you could have it from warm to cold. It doesn't matter what your source of contrast is, whether it's colour or hue or saturation or anything. And then on the top of that, kind of picking up people's attentions, you have these little highlight points which have been picked up from the dry brushing, like the cracks on this wall. This is a perfect example. What that does, if you've got something like, you have this with stripes as well on anything, but if you've got a point for people to focus on, but there is a fade behind it, that fade looks like 3-4 times smoother, whatever the factor is. So if you imagine we had black here, white here, and we faded from grey all the way down, and then we put a big fat black stripe or white stripe through the middle of it, what that does is that grabs your attention, and then your brain just kind of fills in the background, which is like, oh, there's a smooth graduation there. That graduation in colour could not be absolutely flawlessly smooth, but we can achieve a very smooth one. But what we'll do by adding on the layers over the top from the dry brushing, which will pick out the edges, is that'll just trick the eyes more into thinking what we've got in the background is even smoother. So that's what we're going to try and do, and that's kind of the source of people saying, did you airbrush that I think you've had a bit of as well.
Yeah, quite a lot since I started working on especially the vehicle side of things, using this technique on the Typhon and the Imperial Knights. A lot of the comments that I've got have essentially been, what settings do you use? Which, as I've said to quite a few people, is
medium, large,
yeah,
small, like just more dumpling pad.
I don't actually own an airbrush, so I can't help. It's all just done using this, which, I mean, if anything, should just be a really good indication as to just what you can do with it. Super
versatile. You can involve it with airbrushing too. They do marry up very nicely. Maybe that's one for another day for us. But today it's just going to be what you can achieve with Series D, the basics of the technique, and what we'll do is, I think we'll do a black and white one first, so I can explain it in the most compact and quickest way possible, and then we'll take what I've spoken about and apply it to something more complex and tricky and fancy. So this is a Series D dry brush from Artis Opus. I designed these myself, and the things that are kind of special about it are the quality and fill of the hair. Fill means how densely it's packed, how much that hair you've got in there, and rather than a small amount of thick brittle hair, which is common, you have a large amount of very high quality, soft, smooth, silky hair that is packed in really, really densely. Also, the shape is rounded. What that means, rather than having a flat head brush, the only reason why people would use one of those that I can imagine is because they are readily available from traditional painting. They're called flats. You can use them left or right. You can't use them in any other direction for dry brushing because you'll get smears. So ours is round, can be used from any direction, which is great. It allows you to kind of gently buff things, but also when you use those brushes with a technique like dry brushing, they tend to wear like this because their bristles aren't supporting each other. Whereas if you've got a brush like this, you're always working inwards to the point of the most densely packed hairs, and what that means is all the hairs in here are supporting the hairs on the outside, so you're working from the outside in. So what you get, this is kind of like a flat top haircut at the moment. What you'll have is it'll go from this and it'll just be knocked down to kind of a light bulb shape, which is what we view as the perfect shape for dry brushing. We also have a dampening pad here on top of our palette. This is also something that people may not be used to. What we encourage people to do here is not use, it's dry brushing, it's called dry brushing. That's its name. We couldn't change the name of the technique, but that implies that you should be using a paper towel or clogging up your brush again and again with just trips back to the paint to add more paint because it's not coming off as much, and that kills brushes fast. It results in blending that is less smooth. And think how many times you've been told just add water or 2 thin coats or whatever it is. You can achieve a much smoother result by taking exactly the same applications from layering and using it with dry brushing. So we take 1 drop of water with the back of our brush, put it in here, press it in a bit, and what this will do is it will release a consistent amount of moisture to our brush, just about dampening it. Excuse me. And we put that on before, during, and after. That will help paint leave our brush nicely. So take a little one there. It's a new one, so it's super absorbent. There we go, and that allows us to begin. Right, we are going to be doing this panel here. We'll be doing this in black and white. So we're going to be going from black to white on the grayscale spectrum here. Really nice way to be able to teach people how to do things. It's been primed. Primer is a perfect surface for paint to land on. However, it is not. It's not got bite to it in the same way that an actual stipple layer does. So even if I was going to be black was the right color, I would still stipple black on here to begin with. What we're going to do though is we're going to mix a little bit of black and grey. Drag them together. And this is just to make sure that we have something that our dry brushing will stick to nicely. This is going all over the piece. It's think of this as a second primer layer, but this is a primer layer that is got dry brushing especially in mind. That should dry pretty quick.
That is something that I have to say I've noticed quite often is by the time I finish doing an area, the area I started on is already dry and ready to have more colour put on it. Yeah,
absolutely. So it's a really good way to base coat models. A lot of people don't know this, but you can base coat a model super fast with this technique because you don't, if you base coat with layering, if you imagine putting butter onto toast or something, when you drag it, if there's a step in the toast, then you get a load of stuff collecting kind of in that lip. If you're just pressing here, you get an even coat on every single part of the model, recessed, raised, whatever. And that's really, really useful for drying and for not getting too much paint anywhere, a load of quality reasons as well. I'm just going to shift this over so it's definitely in shot. So we're going to our grey now. You could use anything here. I'm just using a mid-grey and a tiny bit at the back. And what we're going to do is my light source, I'm going to choose the light source, which is similar to one that I'm using here in the desk. So the top right is going to be bright and the top left is going to be darker. And we're just going to start stippling on our base coat now. I could actually be using the bigger brush for this, it wouldn't really matter at this stage. So this is the furthest probably from traditional dry brushing, this stage that that people will see. The stippling is quite a new idea to a lot of people. It's just another way of applying paint. I like to think of it as on Microsoft Paint, the spray tool.
Yeah.
That's a really good touching point for people. So what I'm doing here is I've got my grey, more of it's going on the top right part and less of it's going on the bottom left part. And I'm starting with more stippling as I work up, and then I will be finishing with more dry brushing, and I'll be working up with the stippling and I'll be working in this direction with the dry brushing because I want the light to be coming from this direction. So we'll get out some white in a little bit. I'm just building up my layers. Last one's dry. Always start at the place where you want there to be the brightest, because if you make any mistakes there, they're going to be obscured or they'll be hard to notice. So pretty gentle here. I'm going to start doing the traditional dry brushing at this stage. You don't have to be completely rigid with your light source. Just I'm going top right in general, but these sections, if I go directly top to bottom instead of diagonally, they'll be picked up better. Take a little bit of white now. I put them in lines on my texture palette and then pull them into each other. It's the way I've always worked to find it. It really helps you get nice mixes.
That's already something whereby a lot of the stuff that I've done in videos, I haven't done a lot of mixing necessarily. I've kind of stuck with like a small palette of colours, but just kind of layered them on top of each other to get the to kind of get the blending. But it is obviously if you mix stuff together and you can create a smoother gradient, can't you? Do
if you can have quite large jumps as well. If you have, I've got a black, a white, and a grey here. If that was pinks, the jumps that I've got between different colours they look pretty extreme there. I've actually put a little bit too much white in that, and it makes such a big difference. So I can go gently. Get my stippling at this point. Testing it on my texture palette. I don't want to have too much coming off the brush. Gently here, top to bottom. Now, at this point, people might be looking at it thinking that it's not looking as smooth as they imagined. Hopefully what we're going to have kind of appearing visually is this type of step here that I'm doing. This softens everything that goes underneath it. And as each layer has its own highlights put on it, as we add more white into the mix, carefully add more white into the mix.
That is something I think it's worth pointing out as well, is that it is very forgiving.
Yeah,
it's something whereby if you sit there and you kind of go, that's you've either done too bright, or it's not quite the shade that you wanted it to be, or there's just some aspects of it it's not come out the way you wanted it to come out. It's super easy to go back.
Yeah, it's a very organic technique. You can go backwards and forwards extremely easily and jump between steps. We're going to be doing this in a linear fashion. We're going from dark to light, but if I decided I wanted this section to be darker here, I could go back in and choose my black mixed with grey or whatever, and kind of remedy that or alter it if I decided that I wanted things to go in a different manner. So I'm testing here on my palette just to make sure that I know how my brush is going to behave when I take it to the model. There we go. So these are the really important stages that you often find this with miniature painting. That last, I do want to get some stippling up there as well, so this will be done extremely carefully. That last 10%, like this is often where people find like their motivation dipping when they're painting a model. It's when it's at like 70%, they think, oh, I wasted all this time, it's not looking how I imagined it. Those last stages are so important for flavouring and finishing any job and making it turn out how you wanted. There we go, we're starting to see that nicely now. I wonder if the sound of this is coming out on camera. There's a definite like tack, 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 tack as you work through techniques like this. And now we've jumped through to pure white, with those detailed sections in the middle of this panel. You can see them jumping out a little bit more readily. We've got there, you end up doing a lot of layers, but they happen extremely quickly. So you can feel like you're spending quite a long time doing something. And then actually, if you realize that you've both base coated, shaded, highlighted, and dry brushed, textured, patinaed, whatever else is going on, you're doing everything kind of in the same go. And none of the stages take too long themselves either. I find it's every part of the process is pretty enjoyable. There's not like like undoing the base coat or I can't wait to get to highlighting teeth because this bit's laborious or whatever. Yeah. It's one of the things we push. Like you should feel like each stage you're making obvious progress with, and you're learning all the time as well. So there we go. That's pretty much it really on that panel there. I'll just finish it off with a little bit more white.
I would say something that's happened quite a lot to me with using these is that I'll have like nice surprise moments almost every time I paint something.
Oh, that turned out better than I thought.
It's like even if something doesn't go exactly to plan, sometimes you kind of look at it and go, "That's actually really nice. That's worked out really well."
Still pretty happy with the result. Yeah. So now with more white than I had on my brush, but less pressure, I'm just going to really gently make sure that we're not losing any of the texture on this model. You don't always have to go exactly the way of your light source, something I've already mentioned. So this panel, for example, because I've been going in this direction, I've not hit it. So what I can do is with very careful, I call this rolling, I can pick out those edges and make sure they've not been neglected. Could do it like this to edge highlight. This stuff's magic. These are the bits that really make the difference for me.
Yeah, it just brings it all out, doesn't it?
It does. So you can hit all those areas from the side here on this central pillar thing, whatever it is. We've done directional, but now I've made sure that if there is a detail anywhere on the model, it's been cut. So that is pretty much it. Did you learn anything?
It's just, every time it's just so smooth.
We've got some bits here pointing with something pointy. I think due to the temperature in which it's been primed or humidity or something, there's actually a tiny bit of stuff here. It actually looks great. It looks really nice. It's given... It's
kind of like a weathered stone effect that's gone on there.
Yeah, it's given more for it to pick out, but that's basically it. The gentle rolling and what angle you use the brush at is something I really like to push with people. So if there is, just with airbrushing, if anyone's done that, or using a spray can, if you imagine there's a lip on something, here's this area that sticks out slightly. If I dry brush in this direction, I'm not going to hit the area directly on the side of this lip, just as a light wouldn't hit it if there was a light shining from this direction. So you can do a lot of things directionally with it that I think people don't realise, because you're using your brush straight in a jabbing motion, for lack of a better word. You can leave some shadowed areas. You can also use it to shade in that area if you want to. You've got to be quite careful with it, but there's a lot of potential for it. So that is the technique in black and white, basically. Any questions, having seen it in person?
I'm just like, that's like, what, 10 minutes or so?
Yeah, the talking slows it down as well, and in camera, like I paint really close to my face and move around a lot, so I always find it difficult on camera.
Yeah, I do this. I frequently find myself like the model's half off camera.
Oh, yeah. Spend half my time looking here to make sure. I think I start with my palette off screen, but yeah, it's really, really quick. So that is it in a black and white sense. And then what we're going to do in our next step is I'll show just a pure stippling on a flat panel, again in black and white, and then we can do a colour section. I'm actually going to see if I can prime from black here. Like 5 minutes to go, so let's see if we can do something. Obviously, you're always better priming for a can, but for the sake of being expedient, let's see. This should give people a really good idea just how fast these base coats dry as well.
Yeah, when I'm doing the tank and 2 knights that I've been painting, going over a whole model with purple and then finding that before you've even finished one panel, like where you started is already dry.
Yeah.
Just speeds everything up so much.
Yeah, it's quick. Super fast. I'm not sure if you can see the reflection of the light there, but those tiny little lumps and bumps we've got there, if you diluted your paint, you could have them less so, but actually they're exactly what we want at this moment in time, and that's what we need for stuff to be able to bite onto our paint. We want those little tiny textured areas. They're actually quite useful. You can do this as subtly or as not as you like. It's pretty much dry now, so we're going to add in our grey. And again, light source top right here. And we're just going to go quick roll in from one to the other. Also going to remember that to make sure that nowhere gets missed, you are traditional dry brushing. And then because black is such a strong colour, you can use your texture palette as a cleaning tool. So I don't want as much of that left on the brush as I would do normally, because it infects the colours that you're using next. So
That is something else as well. You can essentially just use the same brush for every single part of a model. I mean, as you showed earlier, my large has it's seen some
stuff, hasn't it?
That's a lot of the stuff that I've been painting has been big, and so I've had no, like, I've used the smaller brushes, but for large surface areas and for the kind of the gradients that I've been doing, it's just made sense to continue using the large for everything. But being able to go from using the large on a dark purple to a dark blue to a light blue to a white and then back to a pink, all in the same thing, like in the same painting session, without having to like give it like a deep clean or mess with it. It's one of those things where it just speeds everything up.
It really does. Well, we'll go through the process of cleaning at some point as well later, because you inevitably get questions about it. Right, so kind of building up here, I'm trying to work around the fact that the light is slightly obscuring what I'm doing. So if you do have a newer brush, don't worry if you shed some hairs. If a brush is going to shed hairs, it's first few uses where that's going to happen the most readily and the most regularly, and it's just kind of a bedding in period. If any of you have seen videos of Bohan, who's an incredible painter who helped on the design of these brushes, he is really quite aggressive with his first stages of stippling. Surprises a lot of people. He achieves like lovely, pretty much flawless airbrush quality final result blends, but he goes really, really aggressive in the early stages.
Yeah, I think I've already got a link to his Instagram, so I'll put that in the description so people can have a look, because it's
Drybrush porn.
It's ridiculous.
He's incredible. He's really, really good. He speaks beautifully as well. Incredible vocabulary. He's Polish, but his English speaking vocabulary for talking about painting is outstanding. So we've been against the clock here, but this is the type of patina that really, especially panels, can benefit from massively.
And again, that's from a black base coat up to that gradient in a couple of minutes.
Yeah. And it looks very, very, very effective as weathered concrete. That's kind of the real strength of it for, in terms of 40K applications. These panels on this wall are amazing for demonstrating it. Get it with the directional stuff now. And there's no reason why you could go to the middle of this square and stipple it down with a darker colour or whatever, but jump to a brush that doesn't have any other colours on it now, or has less. I'm going to do some careful work with the white. Test up my panel first. Again, gentle stroking. And then all these texture bits, hopefully this is showing up on camera, those little tiny lumps and bumps and details, we are now highlighting those in the middle of that panel, so they're the sticking points to the paint as we go over it. There.
Well, there you go. I hope you enjoyed that, guys. As I say, there's going to be another video similar to that next week, longer, covering a transition from like pink to turquoisey green, and I also attempt to paint the same thing with actually not too bad. It ended up okay. So yeah, come back next week so you can see that happen again. It'll be stage by stage, step by step, talked through all the way, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much for watching. If you're interested in the brushes, if you're interested in Artis Opus in general, then there'll be plenty of links in the description down below for things like Instagrams and like individual product pages for the brushes themselves. Go and visit those if you would like to. As always, feel free to click all the things, Patreon, video subscribe, all that stuff. Click it if you like, don't click it if you don't want to. And I will see you for the next one.